Guys, so it happened. I'm here and I have an opportunity to talk to AGS directly, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing in today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For some of you guys who have been following my content, some of you guys may know that I was able to talk to NCSoft directly about Throne Liberty. And today, I get to talk to AGS. And apparently, you are the go-to person to talk to. Would you mind introducing yourself and tell us who you are?
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Daniel. My developer name is Tico, so feel free to call me Tico if you prefer. At AGS, my role is Globalization Design Manager. So really, that's a fancy way of saying I'm responsible for coordinating with NCSoft, talking with them about a lot of the systems that are making their way into the game, obviously taking the feedback from our players here in our regions, and making sure that NCSoft is aware of them as well. So that's the role I hold.
Gotcha. So I've been told that you have a pretty solid experience and background when it comes to actually playing the game, Throne Liberty. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe your play experience there?
Yeah, it's pretty varied because, of course, we play a lot on our internal servers as well as we prepare the version for our launch. I've probably done the leveling experience 50 times, something like that. So I also play some on the Korean servers when time permits, of course. And we also have an own internal server. We actually have a tenet on our team. One of our core tenets is to play the game. So we feel very strongly that we're at our best if we play the game. If we play the game, we know what our players are going through, we know what they're feeling. And so we want to make sure that internally we're playing the game as well. So we have play times that we set up with our teammates. We do a lot of the shared content. Of course, bigger things like castle sieges are a little bit more difficult to coordinate, but we really make a huge emphasis to play the game across the team.
Right. So from my understanding, you're kind of the point man when it comes to that direct communication with NCSoft when it comes to Throne.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a team effort, so I don't want to say I'm the only person here.
Sure.
But I do communicate with them frequently, especially as it relates to a lot of our gameplay-related topics.
Okay, so I want to get straight into this. We'll try and keep this short. You guys know how long my videos get every time I say that. But okay, so can you tell me a little bit about the dynamic between you guys and NCSoft? Because developing a game and publishing a game is very different. Usually the developer has a lot more control with the actual product. Can you tell me how much influence you guys actually have over Throne Liberty?
Yeah, so I want to back up to the kind of earlier part of your question, which is to sort of reiterate that I would agree the relationship between the developer and the publisher is really crucial. If you have a strong foundation and a strong relationship there, then you're going to have an opportunity to do something really great with the game. And I think that we have that with NCSoft. We signed this game about 18 months ago now, and since the beginning we've had this sort of shared vision that we would operate sort of as one team with one version of the game, and that's paid off tremendously. I think if you look, you probably know from all the time that you've played, you look at all of the changes that the game has gone through, they're massive, and I think the game is in a much different place now than it is then. So we have a lot of healthy debate about topics. We communicate frequently. Maybe they're tired of hearing of me, I don't know. We talk so much, but we really do have a lot of really healthy back and forth, and we're together in it, and that's how we see it.
Gotcha. So I have to ask you, I did publish a video when I went to NCSoft, had a chance to talk to him directly, as I mentioned in the intro. Did you guys watch that video by any chance? Did you watch it by any chance?
I did watch it.
Okay, so I have to ask. Okay, this is very this is a personal question. No. I want to know, was there any conversation maybe after that, or even before, even prior to that, about the monetization? Because let's be real here, the monetization practice in the East versus the West, they're very different, right? I know for a fact that Koreans also don't really like pay to win, but I could also say that they're definitely more tolerant to it than in the West. And I told them in that interview, which I stand by this statement, that regardless of what I think, there are certainly a lot of people that have called Throne Liberty, because you could purchase Lucent, they've called it pay to win trash, like verbatim, right? Now, our version is for sure, as someone that has played the game extensively, is for sure less pay to win than the Korean version. Lost Ark is also less pay to win than the Korean version. And obviously the one game that you guys did develop, New World, that's one of the 3 MMOs, 2 or 3 MMOs that are like, everyone knows it's not pay to win, right? Now, what I would like to know is, has there been a lot of discussion? How much discussion has there been around the pay to win? And is that something that you guys really pushed back on with NCSoft, or were you guys just like, hey, let's make money buying Lucent or selling Lucent?
Yeah, I would sort of echo what I said in my previous statement, right? Which is we really view it as a partnership. So we talk about all topics. We talk about our business model. We talk about gameplay. And so when I think about Throne and Liberty, what I think is if I compare it to other free-to-play MMOs on the market, it has one of the most fair business models out there. Why do I think that? All progression is available to all types of players. All of our core game content is available to all players without a paywall. None of our purchases are random. It's direct purchase business model. So everything that you purchase, you know exactly what you're getting back. And we intend to be also, we intend to be generous as well. And it's not just in what you purchase being generous, but also some of the changes you're probably aware of, like with the Abyss Dungeon drop rates that were increased significantly and buffed. And so that's where I think that we are with the business model right now in Throne and Liberty.
So what they have done, I mean, every MMO has more vertical progression as a vertical progress game. But when you have a system where you can purchase Lucent or buy gold, anytime you add more vertical progression systems, it becomes more pay to win simply because there's more things to pay for. Now, if you've played Throne and Liberty, a lot of the people that kind of try to defend the game, they say, well, the pay to win isn't bad because you can hit the caps and the gear levels that a pay to win player can. Obviously, it will take you longer, but you can reach it versus in other games where you can never reach the power level and performance of a pay to win player. In Throne, they've actually made it easier over time to trade out your gear. For those of you who don't know what trading is, just think of it as making your character stronger. Okay, but like you trade out your gear, and that system has actually been alleviated. What my question to you, sorry for the long question, is how much are you guys paying attention to the progression rates? So, for example, if we were to release Tier 2 gear, trait resonance out the gate, I mean, that is going to be a huge power discrepancy between pay to win and free to play. Free to play will never catch the pay to win. How important is it for you guys? And how much are you monitoring that progression speed? And is it something that's on your plan to allow players, free-to-play players, to realistically hit these caps before increasing vertical progression?
Yeah, I mean, it's way up there on our radar. It's one of the things that we're going to monitor most often, I would say, both for progression, but also content release cadence. That's a big part of how quickly we want to release content because we want to make sure that players have hit an appropriate power level before we're putting new content in front of them or a new vertical chase in front of them, as you said. So that's a big part of that. It's one of the reasons why, for example, we don't plan to release Tier 2 gear when we release our 2-star dungeons. We think that we will end up releasing those sooner than they were in Korea. And if we release Tier 2 gear, we think it's too fast. It's not appropriate for our player base to have to move that quickly into the Tier 2 gear set. So we're very aware of that, and we absolutely want to make it so that players feel that they have a chance to really progress through what they're experiencing right now, get a full build, enjoy that build before they enter kind of another chase for power.
So are you saying that you're going to make sure that the pacing is done in a way where free-to-play players are going to reach caps, be able to enjoy being at the same level of players who are paying before you before you increase the cap and do things like introduce Tier 2 gear?
It's a tough question because that generalizes sort of a player base, right?
Sure.
And so it's less about the type of spender that you are, and it's more about where is our player base as a whole moving forward. And so what I am saying is that we want to make sure that we have our player base in a healthy state where they're ready for new content or ready for new progression. And so it's less about are all non-spenders in a certain place, and it's more about is there enough mass in the audience that we're actually ready to bring on new systems or new content.
Botting was a major issue in Korea, huge issue. From my understanding, obviously a lot of things have been changed in Korea with how you go about upgrading your gear, and from my understanding, some of that was done to combat botting. Now, botting is way less of an issue in Korea, but there's also less players playing in Korea, obviously the launch of a game versus 10 months later. In the West, a free-to-play game usually is just infested by bots, and AGS doesn't have the best track record with bots when it comes to Lost Ark. It has improved in Lost Ark now tremendously, but the player base also came down. There's going to be a lot of players playing Throne and Liberty at launch. Is there a plan in place to prevent botting? How confident are you with that?
Yeah, so I think you touched on a good point, which is the improvement, right? And I think there's a lot of lessons learned that we have from our previous games that we're bringing into Throne and Liberty so that we're more prepared at launch time. There's several things that we're doing for bot detection and other things. So we are heavily focused on making sure that we're ready to combat bots. And there's probably one more thing that I would kind of explicitly call out, which is there's sort of two avenues for preventing bots. One is detecting them and, of course, trying to ban them. Another is just making it more difficult for them to actually do business. How do they impact the economy? How do they exchange goods? Things like this. So one of the things that we'll be doing is our player trust system. So some of our players from other games may be familiar with that. We'll be bringing that into Throne and Liberty as well with some improvements. And the auction house will be restricted to trusted players. So that's one of the things we're doing. Don't want to reveal too much, but we're hyper aware about bots. And we are definitely bringing those lessons learned from previous games into the Throne launch.
In Korea, I led a big alliance of players, and we were playing competitively. And there is a huge emphasis, not exclusive, but there is an emphasis on competitive play between guilds, going for the castle and all these things. There are rankings. How hard are you guys going to crack down on like AFK macroing? Is that even allowed? Botting and essentially kind of cheating the system, because we felt like in Korea we're going against these other guilds and alliances that were really cheating their activity points. And we kind of felt cheated by the system because they weren't being banned, and we're trying to do it legit. Is this something that you guys are going to crack down on?
I would think of that as a way that, when I view that, it's how do we uphold the integrity of the game? By we, I mean the publisher, we, the developer, NCSoft, the players, the community. So we all have to work together to uphold kind of the integrity of the game, make sure that we're trying to stamp out that type of stuff. I'm not personally kind of responsible for the policies and procedures we have for that. We have separate teams that really monitor and do all of that. But my opinion as a player, as a personal player, is that type of blatant cheating doesn't belong in the game. And so I think that we will make an effort on that.
To be clear, is AFK macroing going to be allowed? I believe in Korea, NCSoft did make a statement because at the TL meetup, Korean players pressed them because there were a lot of Korean players that were like, hey, you have a specific mouse that allows kind of like macroing and stuff. Is this allowed? This isn't botting, it's AFK macroing. Are you guys going to allow it? Because I believe NCSoft said no for the Korean version.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is that you should be at your station if you're playing the game. If you're on a PC or on console, since we're crossplay, you should be sitting at your keyboard if you're playing the game. And so that's the type of integrity that we hope to maintain within Throne and Liberty.
So milestones are a big thing in Throne and Liberty. When can we, if you can answer, when can we expect the first castle siege to take place?
Yes, so milestone system, I want to say two things about it. One is it will be a little bit sped up compared to what it was in the Korean launch. And so that will play out in various types of content, not just the castle siege, as you said, boonstones and world bosses and stuff like that. Right now, the castle siege, which you will notice at launch in the milestone system, but it's set for mid-November. So roughly that 6 to 7 week mark after launch is what it's set for right now. We'll monitor it. Maybe as I mentioned before, the audience isn't quite ready for it. The player base isn't quite ready for it. So we might make an adjustment, but that's what it's, we're targeting mid-November right now.
Do you have any timelines in mind when you are planning on introducing Tier 2 gear?
It's a tough question because we have to see how our players progress. We have some idea of it because, we've looked at some of the anonymized data from the Korean service, so we have some idea of how players progress through Throne and Liberty, of course. But we're a different region. Things have changed in the game. The pacing at which you might be able to progress is different. Maybe some of our rewards have increased or decreased. All of these things play a factor. Nobody's actually played this version of the game yet. And so we do have a target that we're looking at, which is probably in late Q1. But let's see. Let's see how the players progress. We want to be flexible because what we don't want to happen is that we're just gatekeeping content. We don't feel that's the right thing to do. So we want to have targets in mind that we're aiming for or shooting for, but if it's appropriate, we want to move that forwards or backwards to make sure it matches the pacing of our players.
Talandry was a huge expansion that just dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, it was massive.
Yeah.
The world size almost doubled, and along with it came a lot of content. Do you have any timeline for maybe when Talandry is going to come out?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record a little bit here. So quickly just say again, I think it depends a little bit on how players are consuming the existing content pre-Talandry, but we are targeting for late Q1 there.
So runes, trait resonance, substance transformation. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's more vertical progression. Keep in mind, you have to add vertical. It's a vertical progress game. This isn't like a Guild Wars 2. This is a vertical progression game. The game has been out for 10 months in Korea, and this was the latest vertical progression systems introduced to the game, along with the Talandry expansion. How long do you think until we get those?
Yeah, those are a bit trickier because, I would say they're not in our launch version, so they won't be there in our launch version. And that's something that we're still working with NCSoft. We think maybe it needs to mature a little bit more before we bring those systems into our version. So we don't actually yet have a full timeline because we're still working through that with NCSoft, figuring out what types of tweaks we can make into them. What we don't want to do is introduce systems that are not really ready or going to be really favorable for our player base. So that's why they're not in our game yet. What I would say is that we have plans specifically to not introduce runes and trait resonance at the same time. This just kind of goes back to what you were mentioning before about the progression, and we feel that that's probably a little bit too much, especially because as maybe we're catching up or going a little bit faster than the Korean service, we don't want our players to feel a little bit too much pressure there. So we do plan to release runes and trait resonance at separate times.
For those of you who don't know the significance of that, that's significant. That's awesome. I'm actually I'm hearing this for the first time, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's really good.
Awesome.
I want to follow that up with another question though, because runes are directly tied to challenge dungeons. Now, challenge dungeons is something I feel like a lot of people are looking forward to. For those of you who don't know, challenge dungeons are essentially like Mythic Plus dungeons, but in Throne Liberty. Does that mean we're not going to really see that content until obviously the runes are released way later then?
Well, first of all, I don't know that the runes necessarily have to come way later. Let's see if we can make those tweaks or adjustments that are needed that we feel like the system is where our player base would be happy with it. But I don't think that those systems necessarily have to be connected. I know they are right now as a reward structure, but I think other things could be found there. So I wouldn't say that challenge and runes have to be together. They are right now. I would say it's probably a goal of mine personally that they still be, but we want to make sure that they both make sense, but they don't have to be together.
So there is a possibility that some of the content that we get in our game will give different rewards. Possible.
It's tricky. It's a tough answer because, as I mentioned before, we want to be in this kind of one version. So really it's more about how do we work together with NCSoft that we create a palatable version for all players, all international players across all regions. And that's kind of that sweet spot we're striving for.
Gotcha. Substance transformation is a system that there's no way I can explain it right now for this video, but you can look it up. But this is, you essentially feed gear into a system and then you get these fragments that are used for the trait resonance as well as gear, like a random piece of gear. This is a system where a lot of people feel like could completely change the launch of the game, which you confirmed it's not going to be in our launch, simply because you can get boss gear that hasn't really been unlocked. When you do introduce the system, if you do introduce the system, my question to you would be, number one, are you planning on making any adjustments? And number two, well, I guess this is the same thing as number one, but would you lock out specific pieces of gear from being obtainable through that system?
Yeah, I think this is a good example of where different rewards could be possible, mainly because we're at a different state in the player journey that we talked about before, right? Y'all are already in the level 55 cap in the Korean service. Our players won't be there. And so this is an area where we'll definitely make sure that the rewards are appropriate for substance transformation. I think it's not as black and white, though, as will you ever be able to get this item or that item? It's more about when could you possibly get certain items from key systems? Is it a situation where many players have had a chance to earn them kind of the traditional way, and this is its opportunity for some players to catch up or things like that? So there's more nuance to it than I think just yes or no, but absolutely we'll make sure the rewards are kind of tuned appropriately for when it releases. And yeah, I would say the system is not going to release in its current state. We'll have to go through a little bit more kind of maturity before we release it in our version.
Also, one more thing, substance transformation not being in our version, trait resonance not being in our version at launch for the foreseeable future, very, very good, especially towards free-to-play players. Great change.
Happy to hear it.
Server merges. This is a part of Throne Liberty. For those of you who don't know, it was always I think it was planned from the start, from day one, even in Korea, that servers were to be merged, pitting the top guilds and alliances from their respective servers against each other. And there's also obviously cross-server content and stuff. When can we expect server transfers to happen in our game?
I would frame the response a little bit differently because I actually don't think that time is the real factor for server merges. I think it's what's the population look like? What does the community look like in that server? Is there healthy competition between guilds, or has a mega alliance formed that's kind of weeding out competition? And those types of factors are significantly more critical than just time. So, maybe this sounds a little bit like a dodge, but I really believe this. It's not, hey, we've reached this point, it's time to merge. It's let's evaluate each server on a case-by-case basis. Let's see, is the community healthy in that server? Are we getting the types of players that they want? And if we are, then we want to, of course, enable that merge. We're not afraid to do it. We're open to doing it. We're willing to do it. But when the time is, or when the moment is right, because it's not about timing.
Would it be possible for regions to be merged? So like NA West and NA East?
That's something that we've talked about a little, but we've been really so focused on launch. It hasn't been a major point till now, so we're really focused on launch at this point.
Can we ever expect the global version of Throne and Liberty to catch up to the Korean version?
Yeah, it's a dream, for sure, right? It's one of our goals to catch up. I would say it's more like reaching near parity, because there are always things that we need to do as the publisher before we can kind of release certain content, localization, QA, if there's infrastructure changes needed. So all of this has to be considered. But it is our goal to kind of get to this very near parity state. What I will say, though, is that we are, this is one of the great things about having a strong relationship with NCSoft, is that we're working closely with them so that we can have certain pieces of content that do launch at parity with the Korean service. The first of those will be the Halloween event that's coming up later this month, so that will be the same event going on in Korea and in the AGS version. There's some other stuff that I won't spoil yet, but there's some other stuff coming. Yeah, there's some other stuff coming soon, maybe in the December update.
Following up on that, games like Black Desert Online, they've actually caught up, and sometimes they're like a week behind. Lost Ark, a lot closer, but they're still months behind. Do you think it's possible that the global version of Throne will ever get to the point where it's maybe like a week behind, that close, or is that probably not possible?
I think it's tough to answer right now, because we're not even live yet. We need to see what types of challenges we have in a live setting when we're getting new builds, getting new content. And I think it depends on what content is coming as well. You see right now, for example, we're not releasing substance transformation or other of these types of things that we think still need some tweaks. And if we feel strongly about that in other cases, we want to make sure that we're only giving content that's going to be really good for our players. So it's just a really tough thing to say in black and white, yes or no.
One of the most popular questions that I've been hearing that I really haven't heard a solid answer on is Lucent being account bound. Now in Korea, it's bound to your character, or excuse me, your account. So if I have it on this character and I'm rolling on this server with a different character, I still have the same amount of Lucent. What's going to happen with early access and regular launch, October 1st? What's going to happen with the Lucent? Can I play on the early access, farm Lucent, and then use that Lucent in the regular servers?
Yeah, so Lucent is account bound. So just to clear that up, Lucent will be account bound. And if you earn Lucent on one server, you will be able to use it on a second server.
Okay, so here's probably, in my opinion, the most important question for everyone that's playing. Okay, you guys don't know it yet. This is really important. In Throne and Liberty, all the events, the major events, they're scheduled. So for example, in Korea, Siege is every other Sunday at 9 p.m. local time. All of the guild versus guild wars take place 11 p.m. Korean time. Arc bosses take place at 10 p.m. 10 p.m., right? I think 10 p.m.
Yes, 10 p.m.
9 p.m. Yeah, it's
yes,
10 p.m. 10 p.m. local time.
Yeah.
Have you guys decided on what time these events are going to take place for the global version? I've heard a lot of people say, oh, in NA it's got to be earlier. I've heard people say it's got to be later because of work. I feel like this is very significant because I know a lot of people from the West want to play on the East, but they might not be able to actually make some of those guild times depending on the times.
Yeah, we have decided the times. Our plan is to let the players see that at launch, so I won't tell you what times they are now. What I'll tell you is two things, though. One is the dates, so the day of the week that the events occur have not changed. And we have changed the times. We've brought them to be not as late, so earlier in the day, more in line to what we would say is kind of the core gaming hours for our player base.
So I'm just going to push back a little bit on this one. Don't you think it'll be better to let the players know what time these events will take place on the server so that players can better choose their respective regions?
I think there's some merit to that. So why don't we do this? I'll take that back as feedback, and then maybe I'll chat with the team and see if that's something that we want to put out there for the players ahead of time.
I appreciate that. All right, so last question. I have to say this. I'm going to get a lot of support from my KR veteran brethren whatever. A lot of us call Throne and Liberty tanks and liberty. Tanks are insanely powerful, okay? But the core of my question is more, will NCSoft, or how much will NCSoft actually, how much will they listen to the global audience when it comes to balance patches? Because sometimes metas are different, perspectives are different. Will we be heard in the West if we think a weapon like Sword and Shield is insanely overpowered and something needs to be done? But let's say the Korean audience is just like whatever about it. Will we be heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think you will. I think that NCSoft is already showing that. We're already showing that. We've been listening to our players in our betas. We've been listening to all the commentary on forums and Reddit and YouTube and creators. And there have been, as I mentioned before, so many changes to the game already, right? I mean, I think you would probably say the same thing about there being a lot of changes to the game for the better. As, for example, the dynamic event Dominion mode, that's a big one where there was some unbalance there and they made adjustments to that, or the conquest battles as well. So I do expect that NCSoft's going to continue listening to players from all of our regions, including the AGS region. And I feel really confident about that. Yeah.
Okay, I lied. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
Random question. I don't know if you can answer this because of perspectives or whatever, but what class do you play?
I play Invocator.
I don't know what that is.
That's a little tease for you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, all right, fair.
What class are you going to play at launch?
I don't know the name of the class, but I plan on playing either SNS Greatsword, or I might go off meta and go SNS Bow. I might actually do it.
SNS Greatsword? You mean Crusader?
Is that,
well, that's what they call a tease in the biz.
Okay, all right, I love it. I appreciate that. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.
I appreciate the
really
opportunity.
Appreciate it too.
It's been a pleasure. Guys, Throne Liberty is dropping. I don't know when this is going to be published. I'm going to try my best to publish it as fast as possible. Early access is dropping on the 26th of this month, with the full release dropping October 1st. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, really great.